Why do you run away from me? The voice came almost like a whisper in the silence of the soul. Why do you hesitate to show yourself? I, standing in the shadow of my own thoughts, didn't know how to respond. Not for lack of words, but because the truth of my silence hurt too much to be spoken. I don't know if I deserve it, I said softly, almost like someone who doesn't want to hear their own voice. I don't know if I can be seen as I really am, with my flaws, my fears. There was a long, heavy pause, filled with a waiting that seemed to pierce my skin and reach the very depths of my being. Who said you have to be perfect? Who said worth is measured by the absence of pain, by strength, or by a ready answer? I don't look for masks or facades. I look for you, whole. I felt a lump in my throat, and the tears began to come, silently, as if someone finally saw what I was trying so hard to hide, the fragility that haunted me since my first breath. But how can I show myself? How can I let myself be seen if I don't even know who I am? I asked, my voice trembling between hope and fear. Start by cleansing your hands, your gestures, your actions. Not to gain something, but to free yourself from the weight you carry. Cleanse what stains your soul. Clean, I repeated, as if it were an impossible challenge. But what if my hands are so dirty they can't be washed? Nothing is too dirty for redemption. Nothing is beyond the reach of the love I created for you. A mixture of relief and terror washed over me. The relief of knowing there was forgiveness. The terror that this meant I had to face what I had hidden for so long. My flaws, my mistakes. My mistakes. Even the wounds I hadn't even admitted I had. And my heart? I asked. How can I purify it? It's full of resentment, fear, doubts. The heart is the altar where everything is offered. Purifying it means letting go of what corrodes it. It's not easy. No one promised it would be. It's a fire that burns away masks, lies, and false security. My soul cringed at that promise and challenge. Why ask this of me? Why don't you accept me as I am? Because loving is also inviting someone to grow, to become more than they appear to be. Loving isn't stagnating, it's moving, transforming. That conversation, intimate and raw, began to break down the walls I'd erected for years, to sting the wounds I'd avoided touching. And amidst that uneasiness, a question arose insistently, unsettlingly. What if I can't? What if I fail? What if the transformation is greater than my strength? The answer did not come in words, but in a silent, profound certainty that pierced the soul. You won't be alone, you never have been. And in that moment, I understood that the true encounter is not with someone distant and unattainable, but with the essence that lives within me, called to come out of the shadows into the light, from doubt into surrender, from fear into faith. But even then, the path before me seemed uncertain, a chasm between what I am and what I can become. And it is exactly in this abyss that the next stage begins. What does it mean to cleanse your heart to find true freedom? What am I willing to give up to finally find myself? That I would only discover as I continued this journey. You said that purifying the heart means letting go of what corrodes it. But what if what corrodes is attachment itself? I asked, feeling the weight of this truth crushing me. Exactly, he replied, with a calmness that disconcerted me. Attachment is the anchor that ties your spirit to a place where it can no longer grow. But letting go hurts. Letting go of people, dreams, certainties feels like mutilation, like tearing pieces of yourself apart. Often it is, he admitted. The pain of detachment is the price of freedom, but only those who dare to let go can fly. My breathing grew heavy as the fear of loss washed over me. Losing what I know, losing those I love, even losing the image I've built of myself, it all seemed an unbearable risk. What if I lose myself in the process? What if, when I let go, I discover there's nothing left? Then you will find something much greater than anything you ever had, yourself. I remained silent, listening to the echo of that promise that seemed more like a provocation. Why would it be so difficult to accept that emptiness can be the gateway to fulfillment? Why do I fear the void? I asked. What is it about it that scares me so much? The void is where the new is born. But you fear the void because in it, for the first time, you are completely exposed. Without defenses, without masks. And what protects me then? Courage. The courage to face your own shadow, your inner demons, your deepest doubts. It was as if a dim light began to illuminate a dark path within me, a path I'd always known existed, but never had the courage to tread. This courage, How do I find it when everything inside me screams to run away? She's there, hidden in your wounds, in your tears, in the nights when you thought you were alone and you weren't. I felt a mixture of hope and fear. Hope because I finally understood that the strength I sought wasn't something external, but an inner flame. Fear because I now knew I would have to feed that flame with everything I had, including the pain. What if this flame goes out? Then you will light another. You will hear the call again, and so on until the cycle is broken. I realized that transformation wasn't a one-time event, but an ongoing battle, a daily duel between the old and the new, between fear and courage, between who I am and who I can be. And what role does silence play in this struggle? I asked, trying to understand the invisible forces surrounding me. Silence is the sacred space where the soul speaks without words. It is there that you hear what your heart truly desires, without the voices imposed by the world. But how can you remain silent when everything around you screams for immediate answers? Haste is the enemy of truth. Silence is an act of rebellion against chaos. It is a return to the essential. As I absorbed those words, I felt the abyss begin to transform into an invitation to let go of what no longer serves me, to face my fear, and above all, to listen to the voice that was always there, waiting to be heard. But even with this new clarity, a doubt remained, insistent and cutting. What if I can't be silent? What if my heart remains tumultuous and my mind refuses to quiet? The answer came as a whisper. Then you will learn to love chaos. Because only those who embrace chaos can find true order. And in that revelation, I realized that the journey wouldn't be about eliminating fear, pain, or confusion, but rather about learning to walk alongside them. Still, there was something that needed to be unraveled. What, after all, does it mean to love chaos? And how can this acceptance transform the way I see myself and the world? The answer, I knew, would come in the next stage of this conversation that was no longer just with me, but with everything I was becoming. You told me to love chaos, but how do you love something that seems to want to destroy everything? I asked, feeling the lump in my throat tighten. Chaos is not the enemy. It is a creative force, he replied with the serenity known only to eternity. It is the fertile ground where life reinvents itself, where the new emerges after everything old falls away. But there is no safety in chaos, only uncertainty and fear. How can I feel safe embracing this? True security has never come from the absence of risk, he said, almost smiling. It lies in your ability to remain whole despite the storms, in your faith in your own strength to be reborn. Those words shocked me because they challenged everything I sought: comfort, stability, certainty. And there, before me, was a different, almost crazy proposal: to accept instability as an essential part of life. That seems like a paradox, I murmured. How can I stand firm on the unstable? It's a paradox that only the soul understands, he said. The fixed point is not in external things, but within you, in your center where nothing can disturb the peace. For a moment I tried to imagine this center, an island of calm in the midst of the storm, and I realized I had never truly sought this calm. I had always tried to tame the storm, control the waves. Why do we resist chaos so much? Why do we cling to the known even when it destroys us? Because the known, even painful, is comfortable, he explained. The unknown requires courage, requires trusting in the invisible, and that is frightening. I kept thinking about how my life was filled with toxic comfort zones that prevented me from growing, as if each attachment were an invisible shackle, holding my soul in a golden prison. And how do I break these chains? How do I free what is trapped inside me? Breaking up isn't an act of brute force, he warned me. It's a delicate process of self-knowledge and acceptance. First, recognize your chains. Look at them without fear. Then decide to no longer be held hostage by them. These words brought to mind a question I had been dreading to ask. What if I can't recognize myself? What if I run away from myself? Running away from yourself is the longest and most painful path, he said firmly, and it will always be in vain, because you carry your reflection wherever you go. I felt a huge weight fall onto my shoulders. Escape was an illusion, a maze with no exit, and true freedom could only come from facing my own shadow. But I'm not afraid of my shadow, I admitted. What if I find monsters in it that scare me too much? Everyone carries monsters, he replied, but they are pieces of you that cry out for love, not rejection. This revelation changed everything. It wasn't about fighting what scared me, but about embracing those parts with compassion. How do I love what I reject in myself? How do I transform fear into light? Light is not born from rejection, but from acceptance. When you embrace your shadows, they lose their power to control you. You become whole. And then, I felt a silent invitation. Are you ready for this journey? My response was hesitant because I knew the path would be painful, full of internal confrontations and doubts. What if I trip? What if the weight is too much to carry? Then learn to rest in what is greater than you, he whispered, in the presence that never leaves, in the strength that transcends time. That conversation brought up a deep dilemma: how to balance the love of chaos with the desire for peace, how to walk through the darkness without losing hope, and what does it mean, after all, to be whole in a fragmented world? These questions stirred within me, setting the stage for the next revelation. What I didn't know yet was that the answer to this concern was closer than I imagined, but it would take courage to see it. And courage, as I discovered, is the rarest currency we possess. You said courage is the rarest currency we possess, but how do I find it when everything inside me screams for escape? I asked, my voice heavy with the weight of someone carrying the weight of the world. True courage is not the absence of fear, he replied, looking at me with the infinite patience of someone who understands every internal battle. It's moving forward despite fear. It's dancing with it, not fighting it. This answer echoed within me like a song I'd forgotten to hear. But how do you dance with fear? How do you transform panic into steps, anxiety into rhythm? It seems like an impossible task, I admitted, feeling despair growing. What if I stumble? What if fear overwhelms me? Stumbling is part of the journey, he said, with a tenderness that surprised me. Don't judge yourself by your mistakes, but by the courage to get up and keep going. I wanted to believe, but fear was a shadow that stretched long and cold over my every dream. Why does fear have so much power over us? I asked. Why does it feel like an insurmountable wall? Because fear protects what we love, he said, almost like a secret revealed. It protects your soul from pain, from loss, from the unknown. It is a harsh but often unfair guardian. It was then that I realized fear is a misunderstood ally, an armor that, at the same time that it protects, imprisons. How can I transform this armor into wings? How can I free my soul from the captivity of fear? First, you must look at him honestly, he replied. Recognize his presence, name his face, understand his language. Only then will you be able to dialogue with him and not be held hostage. The idea of talking to fear seemed strange, almost absurd, but in that moment, it made sense. And when the voice of fear is louder than mine, when doubt becomes a scream, then remember who you are, he said firmly. You are a child of the light, made to shine even in the darkest nights. That statement hit me deep in the chest, igniting an old, forgotten fire. But sometimes I feel so small, so fragile in the face of the world, I confessed, my voice breaking. Fragility is not weakness, he corrected. It is the condition for true strength. He who knows how to recognize his vulnerability walks with his feet on the ground and an open heart. I opened my eyes to the silence that followed, feeling something inside me begin to break. So the courage I seek is not a shout of power, but a whisper of acceptance. Exactly, he confirmed. A whisper that grows into a song, a light that never goes out. I wanted to ask more, to understand the mysteries of this transformation, but a deep doubt arose. What if I can't hold this light? What if, halfway through the journey, I get lost again in the darkness? The light within you is indestructible, he replied, as if he already knew all your falls and rises. Even when it seems extinguished, it shines in the shadows, waiting to be rediscovered. This promise was both a comfort and a challenge. So what's stopping me from taking the next step? I asked, feeling hesitation mixed with hope. You yourself, he replied. Your fears, your doubts, your old stories. How do I break free from these stories that tell me I'm not enough, that I'm going to fail? Telling a new story begins with a simple act, forgiveness, he said. Forgive yourself for the times you believed the lies, for the times you gave in to discouragement. Forgiveness, that light word, seemed like a weight I would never know how to carry. Forgiving myself is as difficult as forgiving others, I confessed, feeling the knot in my chest. Because forgiveness is an act of courage, he said, and courage is born when you decide to be bigger than your wounds. What he was saying was far from easy advice. It was an invitation to an internal battle, a quiet revolution. And when everything seems too dark, when the pain is unbearable, then seek me, he said, his voice a hug and a shelter. Not to escape the pain, but to find within it the path to the light. And there, in that silent dialogue, one last question emerged, urgent and disturbing. What will be the price of the courage I desire? Because all courage, all light, has a cost. But what I didn't know yet was that this price would be the key to true freedom, and that the next stage of this journey would reveal more than just answers. I would reveal myself. You said courage has a price, I began, feeling the weight of this newfound truth. But why does freedom require sacrifice? Why can't it be simple, light, like a good dream? He looked at me with profound serenity, as if he had been waiting for this question for all eternity. True freedom is never free, he replied. It requires you to cast off the invisible chains you created yourself, to break down the protective walls fear has erected. It is a rebirth, not a gift given effortlessly. I wanted to resist. Who would want to pay such a high price? Who would accept the pain of stripping away the illusions that comfort them? What if I fear this pain? If the thought of losing everything I know is greater than the desire for freedom, then you will be caught between two worlds, he said with the steady calm of one who knows the human heart. Between the prison of fear and the vastness of the unknown, between the security of the past and the risk of the future. I found myself stuck right there, at an invisible crossroads where the decision seemed impossible. How to choose when the right path is the scariest. The right path is not always the easiest, he replied, but it is the one that leads to the truth of your being. The truth. That word sounded like a powerful whisper. I wanted to hide from it, but I also felt its pull pulling me in. And what truth should I seek? I asked, almost voiceless. The truth that liberates, that heals, that transforms, he said. A truth that does not fear darkness because it recognizes it as part of the path, but the fear of the dark, of loneliness, of uncertainty still paralyzed me. Why is this darkness so frightening? I asked. Could it also be the source of light? He smiled, a smile full of compassion and mystery. Exactly. Darkness is the womb of creation, the space where everything is renewed. Without it, light would have no meaning, no form. This thought caused a whirlwind within me. If darkness and light are part of the same dance, how can we accept the shadows without fear? How do we embrace the shadows we carry? How do we make pain an ally, not an enemy? First, you must allow yourself to feel, he said gently. Pain should not be denied but understood. It is a messenger, a warning of what needs to be healed. I wondered how many times I had run from my own pain, trying to hide wounds that bled silently. And when the pain seems unbearable, when the weight is too much. So remember that you are never alone, he said, that the greater force that sustains the universe also dwells within you. This presence, so great and yet so intimate, calmed my racing heart a little. But how can I maintain this faith when everything seems to conspire against me? Faith is not a constant feeling, he explained. It is a daily decision, a choice to continue despite doubts, a commitment to one's own soul. I felt a lump tighten in my throat as I thought about the internal struggle this represented. What if I fail in this fight? If I weaken? If I give up? Every fall is a learning opportunity, he said. Failure is not the end, but the beginning of a new attempt. This idea was both comforting and challenging. I wanted to embrace this opportunity, but the fear of failing again held me back. How do I find the strength to get up every time I fall? Look within, he replied. There lies an inexhaustible source of courage, of hope, of light. The inner strength, the silent resistance, seemed like a fragile but resilient flame. What if this flame goes out? Then light it again, he said, with the certainty of one who knows the cycles of life. Because you are made to shine, to transform, to love. And at that moment, a final doubt arose, deep and disturbing. How do I know if I'm really ready to pay the price of freedom? Because deep down, I feared that the real challenge wasn't the path, but what I would find at the end of it. And that question would echo within me, setting the stage for the final revelation. You said I needed to be ready for freedom, but what if I'm never ready? My voice cracked, filled with a doubt that seemed almost too great to bear. What if the price is too high and the road too long to walk alone? He looked at me, and in the serene glow of his eyes, there was a patience that only time can offer. Readiness is not a fixed condition, he said, as if revealing a hidden secret. It is a journey, a process that is built step by step, stumble by stumble. This answer disarmed me, because I always imagined that I would wake up one day ready and complete. But he showed me that I wasn't. There is no end point where everything fits together perfectly, he continued. But there is the choice to keep going each morning, even when the weight of life seems overwhelming. I wanted to ask, what happens when the desire to give up is greater than the desire to continue? This is human and part of the journey. Weakness and strength coexist within you, like two opposing forces fighting for dominance. The secret is to acknowledge this struggle without giving in to either. How can we live with this duality without going crazy? How can we find balance in the chaos? The answer lies in the inner silence, he said, in the space between thoughts, where the soul can breathe, connect with the essence that transcends pain and fear. It was then that I felt the weight of the truth. I needed to learn to silence the noise that blinded me, that kept me trapped in the past and the ghosts I created. But silence isn't empty, is it? I asked. It can be an ally, but it can also be an abyss. Silence is a mirror, he replied. It reflects everything you are, everything you fear, and everything you desire. Facing this mirror requires courage, but it is in this confrontation that transformation occurs. What if I were afraid to look at myself in the mirror, to face my own shadows? Fear is an inevitable companion, he said, but not the ultimate enemy. Facing it is the first step to freeing yourself from the invisible chains. I thought about how many times I let fear control my choices, trapping me in a cycle of self-sabotage. And what happens after I face that fear? After I allow myself to be vulnerable? He smiled, a smile that carried the promise of rebirth. You discover the strength that has always been there, he said, hidden beneath layers of doubt and defenses. This strength is your truth, your light, that not even the darkest nights can extinguish. But what if that light seems dim, insignificant compared to the immensity of what I need to face? It's not the size of the light that matters, he explained, but its persistence. A single flame can illuminate the darkness of an entire room if kept burning. This metaphor resonated deeply with me. I always wanted to be a giant, invincible, but perhaps being constant would be enough. And how do you keep that flame burning when everything around you conspires to extinguish it? Cultivate love for yourself, he replied, his voice full of tenderness. Love is the fuel that sustains the soul on its journey, even when the path seems impossible. But self-love isn't something I learned easily. I often looked in the mirror with judgment and rejection. How can I love myself if I am my own biggest critic? The first step is to forgive, he said. Forgive the failures, the falls, the wrong choices. Forgiving is freeing yourself from the prison of the past and making room for growth. That word echoed within me like an irresistible invitation. And after forgiveness comes acceptance, he said, the most profound and transformative of liberations. Accepting who you are with all your shadows and lights is the beginning of true freedom. I felt like the pieces were finally starting to fit together, even though the puzzle of my life was still far from complete. What if I feel lost again? Return to silence, to love, to forgiveness, he concluded. And remember, you are never alone. These words remained engraved in me, a permanent invitation to continue, even when everything seems to be falling apart. But one last doubt, perhaps the deepest, still pulsated. If freedom is a path, not a destination, then what is the true meaning of all this? And that question would stay with me, not as a burden, but as the spark that ignites the eternal search for meaning.